And, you know, I knew what that meant, being in in Native ceremonies, but it was never spoken about, you know, like, this is what this word means. This is where it comes from. We're grateful to be able to use it, or, you know, any context. And I was driving when I first went to the Sundance ceremony out in South Dakota 3 or 4 years ago. It's on the Rosebud Reservation, the Lakota, you know, Nation people. And I was driving back in the car. It's a 3-day drive, you know, all day. And I was just checking my email on my phone, and I got an email from one of the people in this men's group. And at the end, he wrote, "Aho." And it was like, I experienced it very differently. You know, all year I'd been hearing people say it. I'd been saying it. It feels good to say it for me. But then I was just in that cultural experience, deep Lakota space, and someone said "aho," or I read it, and I was like, wait, do we know, or are we acknowledging where this comes from, like whose language this is? So it just hit me. And then I ended up going to a weekend men's retreat, just like we have with every man. And again, they were saying "aho," and it really, you know, registered, triggered me in my body. Like, not that we shouldn't use the word, but that it should, that I felt that it would be, it's important to acknowledge where it comes from, the culture. So it was really after that retreat, which was, I guess, a year ago in December, that I started to write some notes together that, you know, took about 6 or 8 months, and then became, or actually 9 months, because it got published in September, it became that article. So that's kind of the process. And it's really, you know, an invitation. There's, you know, I tried to put the words together in the article, but it's, the idea here is that we're part of a men's movement in America, right? There's different men's organizations, and primarily the men's movement, you know, the men's organizations that are national, including, you know, Menschwork and JMR, are primarily, were at least founded by white men. You know, even that the Menschwork is Jewish men. You know, as I tried to describe in the article, it's important to make the distinction, I feel, between us as cultural beings that, you know, my family's from the Ukraine, and we have that history, and then someone on the calls probably families from Poland, and so on and so forth. There's people from England that are white, right? All Australia, all around. That's a cultural, that's a personal heritage. That's what makes us human. But race doesn't make us human, actually. It makes us, you know, citizens, you know, that were taken in the census. But it really strips us of a personal identity that, like, I know you, you know, Rick, I know you as your story. No, you're just a white man, you know, as a political being. And that's what I am. And in the journey for me of writing that article, I realized, okay, well, that's how this country works, you know. And like, I was fortunate enough to find that podcast as I was writing that article about the history of race, that it really started in the 1600s. You know, maybe there was a caste system in other cultures previously, there was, but race as a construct, a social construct, did not exist before the 1600s in was it Bacon's Rebellion? You'll have to look at the article again. But it was used as an economic tactic to enforce, slavery, basically. So the way we have it now, we're white men as political beings. And for 20 or 25, 30 years of my life, I was reading books by Black authors when I was very young, and to understand what it's like for them to live in this country. And it's been very challenging for me to claim my white identity here, because it doesn't jive with my values, right? The white population is the colonizers here. So, I don't want to identify with that. But as I wrote this article, I realized, wait a minute, actually I can flip this. I can flip this script here and say, well, all right, I am white, but I'm not going to be white the way that white has been used for the last 400 years. I'm going to invite the men's movement, and we're all, here in this Menschwork, focused on compassion, spirit, and what's the third one? Is it?
Integrity.
Integrity, exactly, right? Thank you. So then I think there's resonance with those values in the Mankind Project and Every Man and the Sterling Institute, other men's organizations. We're trying to improve ourselves, be better fathers, be better husbands, be better, employees or business owners, show up in the community in a good way. And so that's the intention of the men's movement, as I see it, right? To be better men. And it happens that we're to be better white men, because we primarily are white men. Of course, there's diversity. So for me, the next step, and what I tried to articulate in the article, the next step of being a better white man as a political being in this country is to actually address the most, the biggest elephant in the room in this country, which is our country was founded on slavery and genocide. That's how we have the wealth that we have. And it just happened a couple of days ago. My wife wanted us to watch a movie. We ended up watching this movie called 13th, which I'm just going to invite you to look at this here. This is it's on Netflix. It's an incredible documentary about from slavery to criminal with one amendment. So I just watched that a couple of days ago, and it talks about the 13th Amendment. And there was one, so it says that all, Black people are now free, right, and have the same rights, except everyone has the same rights except if you're a criminal. And that loophole is what has now generated the prison industrial complex. Not over the last, since that amendment came into being. That's where the chain gang came from, because we needed to continue that economic system of free labor. So, this is hard to swallow, but it's important as white men, I feel, to get real with it in this day and age. And so, so that's what I'm saying is taking it to that next level. If we're thinking about what do we want, what would Mensches do? What do we want our identity to be associated with from this day forward for the next 400 years? For my son and his son or daughter down the line, that this, 2020, that this century, this decade will be the pivot point where we can say, wow, white men used to be associated with, colonialism, imperialism, you know, genocide, slavery, and now white men can be associated with you know, healing and compassion, integrity, spirit. So and so there's that connection then also with Native America, right? Because we're using and benefiting from the Schwitz, right? So we can say, at least acknowledge where it comes from and say thank you to these people for having it, and maybe learn something about who they are in the Northeast. You know, who lived where Isabella Freedman is, you know, what Native people live there, and maybe we can mention their names when we bring those sweat lodge stones in. You know, that makes a difference. That makes a difference. It's that acknowledgement. So it's not just on the policy level, it's on the storytelling level also. You know, the stories that we tell on Saturday night, you know, around after Havdalah, you know, to acknowledge those people. So that's the thinking that I have. And then from there, it can go even further to realizing that we have, you know, when you have privilege, right, you have responsibility in a sense, right? And we have, when you have privilege, you have resource also. So to think about, well, we have this resource, and this is what comes back to what David, you were saying about reparations. And reparations isn't just like, oh, well, you know, they should get to live in my guest room of my house, you know, or I'll just move out of my house and live in the backyard and they get to live in my house, right? Reparations is about economic regeneration, right? Regenerating the capacity to, you know, nourish ourselves, you know, ourselves and each other's communities that are impoverished, you know, to support. So bringing resource. So that's how I'm thinking about it, is we have resources, we have power, we have voices. As white men, people do listen to us, and it's right now it's things are changing with the Me Too movement, and it's there's some challenges, but if we start to speak up together, then we don't know what's possible, but I know it could be good. It could be really good, and that's what in that article is an invitation to Menschwork and to all the men's movement organizations, you know, and I'll slowly have these conversations with different men's organizations that together we could become a national men's movement, and then you know, start to build alliances and to say we want to actually stretch to this next level of actually addressing some of these things, even just in language at first, even just, you know, creating a declaration. From our language comes action. So that's kind of the whole idea there. So I'll just leave it open, I guess, for a few minutes to anything anyone wants to share from all of that. I think anyone that hasn't spoken yet would be great.